Welcome back to Out of Order with Ella. I'm Ella, and this is kind of the first real episode since last week was more of an introduction. So hey, we're really gonna kind of get a vibe for what the show is gonna look like week to week. And just a reminder that I would really love to share about the people that you love, that you lost, and I added a form on the Out of Order with Ella Instagram, so you can go and share the person you lost, something that you loved about them, a special story, whatever feels right. Without further ado though, let's start with presenting. I actually think what I came up with is more of an acrostic rather than an acronym like I said last week, but not an English teacher, so just let me know if that's not correct. But presenting will include person, recap, eats, exercise, new stuff today and tomorrow, and it's really just a way for me to stay on top of the things I'm talking about, but let's be real, I'll probably bounce all around anyway. But we'll start with recap because I think it just makes the most sense to start there. So I'm currently in my internal medicine rotation in PA school at a pretty big hospital, and I just finished week 4 of 5 this past week. In this rotation, I've been on a different service each week on the medicine team where I'm either admitting or rounding on people who are admitted to the hospital. And I kind of think of the medicine team as the providers who are putting everything together between different specialists, especially at a big teaching hospital where you're caring for patients who are really sick and have really complex medical histories. And honestly, this rotation has been so hard. Despite the fact that I actually really love internal medicine, it's been hard for other reasons, but we will get into that later. Something that is so important to me, you guys. It's been such a lifesaver in the summer for the past few years. Is Love Island USA. You guys, I'm not a big reality TV person, but 3 years ago, I stumbled upon Love Island, and holy crap, I am beyond obsessed. Yes, it's raunchy, but the reason why I love it is because it's literally a social experiment, and we watch people change and learn and grow in real time. It's so interesting just diving into why they're doing what they're doing, the different kinds of personalities, and I'm so invested. I could absolutely dive in, but I'll spare you all. Spare you. Yeah, if you watched last season, you'll get that, but in case you don't watch, I won't go on. I'll just leave you with the top 3 thoughts that I've had this week. 1, Austin, one of the realest in the villa. Iris is so cool, girl. And finally, protect Jalen at all costs. Okay, on to the next. Other than that, I got to see my grandparents, which really brightened my week, and Luke and I went to a friend's wedding, which was so beautiful and fun, and that brings me to my person of the week, which is Luke. So Luke is my boyfriend on earth, and he is my person of the week because I'm so proud of what he's doing in his business right now. He's the co-owner of a furniture store called Minnesofa that's located in Plymouth, and he's in the process of opening a second store in Moorhead where he went to college. And it's just so cool to see his passion for business and team building grow and evolve, and to see him grow as a leader and person, and I'm just so proud of him. He's also my person of the week because he just makes me feel so loved and supported every day, even when he is crazy busy, and I'm just so grateful for my angels sending me him. On to eat and exercise. Important recaps to me because these 2 things are foundational to my sanity. Eat's highlight of the week was my breakfasts. I cannot skip breakfast, and especially if you're a girl, you shouldn't either. And this week I made really simple overnight oats with Clean Simple Eats chocolate PB protein powder, chia seeds, whole milk, fresh berries, Purely Elizabeth vanilla chocolate something granola and honey, and it was so delicious and made me feel so good in the mornings. I was really slacking on protein the past few weeks, in the morning especially, and it just reminded me how important a high protein meal right away in the morning is to keep my body and mind going. Now, exercise. I've been off my exercise game, and honestly, it's because I've been feeling so weak from anxiety, but I've been trying to, at the very least, go on a walk each day if I feel like I can't do a strength or Pilates workout. Little video like I normally do. And getting outside has just been so therapeutic in itself. Another thing I've been doing this week is hammocking. I feel like either way I'm saying that does not sound right. And I've always felt that way about how I pronounce that. But anyway, I don't know about you guys. When I was in high school, there was a hammocking. I'm just going to say it really fast so that you can't tell, but okay, I'm drawing attention to it. Anyway, but there was a craze where everyone and their mother bought those Enos. I had to look it up because I could not remember the name. And anyway, I've just been studying and writing in my hammock, and literally it makes me want to be outside for hours. Now on to new. So I want to share something new that I learn every week, whether it is something that I just pull out of the vault, which is my brain, that I learned a long time ago, or a new study I find interesting because we're lifelong learners around here. This week's news comes from my favorite news outlet, TikTok, which is kind of kidding, kind of not. I do love following physicians and PAs for stories, perspectives, and sometimes they'll bring up recent studies that they found, which is what this week's info is all about. I just so happened to come across a physician on my FYP, obviously. If I remembered her username, I would credit her, but she was basically debunking health trends, and one of them was about cold plunging. And I don't know about you, but the thought of cold plunging sounds so terrible to me. But I've seen it just exploding on social media for supposed like muscle recovery, mental health benefits. So I think about it from time to time. I haven't done it, but I think about it. And this doc referenced a new study published in May that specifically looked at recovery from exercise-induced muscle damage after cold or hot water immersion in women specifically. Sorry, men. And essentially found that despite distinct acute physiological responses to the cold or hot water immersion, neither actually improved subjective or objective recovery outcomes during a 72-hour follow-up period. And okay, this is not a podcast critiquing research, but I did just think it would be fun to share tips or studies that I hear about for you to go read on your own and draw your own conclusions from. But my conclusion for now is that I don't need to be forcing myself to cold plunge for physical recovery anytime soon. Wrapping up on presenting, talking about today and tomorrow. Overall, I'm doing a lot better today than I was all of last week, and honestly the last few weeks. I have just really focused on taking care of myself over this past weekend, getting lots of sleep, eating good food, getting out in the sun, which I feel like has had a huge impact because it's been so rainy in Minnesota for the past few weeks. But yeah, the past few weeks have been really hard being in the hospital. It's just been very triggering. And I didn't really expect that because it's not like it's my first time being in the hospital since I was in the hospital when Mac died in the ICU. But something is happening physically when I'm in there, and it's just really giving me a lot of anxiety. And so it's been a lot of learning and growing through those feelings. But this week, the tomorrow part of today and tomorrow, I have my last week at the hospital, and I'll take my end of rotation exam for internal medicine on Friday. And we're just going to leave it there. Today, something I wanted to expand more on for the remainder of the episode is how grief shows up in my day-to-day life and the things I have found really important for setting myself up for success. So as a reminder, I am almost 4 years into life after losing Mac and Sam, which might seem like a long time to some people, but I'm starting to feel like no matter how much time passes, grief never really gets easier. It does change because I definitely think things get better in the sense that your body evolves because you physically cannot survive in the pain that you're feeling just 24/7 in those immediate weeks and months following the death. That's not to say the pain goes away, but rather that it finds ways to hide itself, for better or for worse. I think the biggest thing that changes is just learning more about how grief is going to coexist with everything else in your life. Everyone has different emotional or physical triggers or really hard days out of all the hard days, and you start to pick up on what those are for you and going to be as time goes on. But the kicker is that those might change over time too. While there's so much nuance in grief and how it affects people, there is strangely a lot of common ground regardless of how the person who died in your life died or your relationship to them. I really came to learn this in my support group for young adults who lost someone out of order. It just never fails to amaze me how we can all come together and I can see pieces of myself in each of them who has lost someone so differently to me and with such different relationships and in ways that they lost that person. There are so many layers when it comes to losing someone out of order. Just imagine the differences in grief from, for example, losing someone to a sudden, senseless accident compared to the death from a severe illness like cancer, compared to a loss as complex as suicide. It doesn't seem like people who lost people in each of those tragedies would be able to relate, but the common ground I've noticed is really rooted in the pain of life continuing without your person and the way that the world makes grievers feel. But back to grief in my life, because at the end of the day, my own grief story is truly all I can speak on. Grief has looked pretty similar over the past 2.5 years, which is the same amount of time I've been in PA school. I feel like to really get into what I've learned about grief in my life, I need to give a little backstory on how I got into school, what those first few months looked like. The transition to PA school happened very fast for me. I finished out the application cycle that I had started after the boys died, and probably for the best did not get accepted that cycle. For those of you who don't know, each PA school application cycle is a year-long process that starts in the spring, and it really doesn't end until the next cycle starts the following spring. I think that most people probably find out if they're accepted on the waitlist sometime in late summer into fall, which of course was really not the case for me. Like finding out definitively if I was going to be in or having to apply again at least. I applied to one program in Minnesota and over 10 programs all over the country, which looking back was absolutely crazy because I could not imagine being further than like 30 minutes from my parents and my families, and I actually don't think I would have made it if I would have gone out of state. But as I said, didn't get accepted first application cycle, so obviously had to do it all over again starting in April of 2022. And again, all I heard was rejection, rejection, rejection until March of 2023. So almost a whole year into the second application cycle before I got the call that a spot had opened up to start PA school in May of 2023, a little over a month later, but just 30 minutes from home. I don't know what would have been better, honestly. Everyone says it was probably good to have such little time to process, so I couldn't overthink the fact that I was going to be starting so soon instead of going through the whole cycle for a third time. But personally, I think I could have probably used a little time to process and think through like what being in school full-time again would look like, and full-time medical education nonetheless. But it was what it was, and I would spend the next month finishing out my job at the time, getting ready to move out of my parents' house for the first time since the boys died, and preparing to start what I was told would be the hardest part of my career. I think the attitude in the medical world, especially as a student, is very suppress your own feelings and problems and fake it till you make it, which is exactly what I tried to do that first semester. I'll be the first to tell you that was the worst plan I could have had. Despite what the world tells you, not everything is just push through it-able. I don't know what that word was, but whatever. There are a lot of things that we can battle through to do what we have to do, but for me, my grief and trauma, especially in the summer months, were not something I could just put on the back burner and just willpower through. That first semester of PA school, my plan was just that grief wouldn't be a problem because it couldn't be a problem, which was the worst plan I could have had. I had massive anxiety around school and tests that I had never had before. I was so fatigued, I couldn't make it through the day without a 1 to 2 hour nap after class, which sometimes still happens. But anyway, I had headaches nearly every day. I didn't tell any of the faculty what I was going through, and therefore I missed deadlines, I failed tests, and then I ended up in the ER a week before the 2-year anniversary in July towards the end of the semester with what absolutely were physical manifestations of grief combined with my body telling me, hey, acting like grief trauma are not here is not going to make them go away. 2 years later, I can say that I definitely have come a long way from where I was then. And now I'm on less than 3 months out from graduating and have had plenty of success on exams and in rotations. And there are many things I've learned and implemented to get me through this challenging season during a very challenging life. But I tried to summarize them in 3 kind of key points. The first, that it's better to communicate and plan for hard days than for hard days to come with no plan at all. This may not feel right for everyone. And for a lot of people, it probably feels really uncomfortable, but I do encourage you to try it if you haven't and see what happens, especially if you are experiencing any of what I shared about those first few months of PA school. I have found that in settings that I know are going to be triggering for me, like the ER or the ICU, or during the time periods that I know have been a marked season of struggle, like June and July leading up to the death anniversaries, that it is really helpful to communicate these things with the people around you. You might tell them about this piece of you and it never comes up again, but there's so much value and even healing in having that conversation ahead of time so that you can make a game plan to set you up for success, or at the very least, just give them a heads up. Hey, I'm going through this. You don't have to do anything about it, but I just wanted to let you know. You would be amazed with, just by sharing that, the grace that people can give you, which kind of gets me into next point here. It's not an I can't do that. It's what needs to happen so that I can do that. So I chose to continue on with a career path that, rightfully so, makes very little room for accommodation when it comes to personal struggle. And I say rightfully so because there's only so much that you can change about medical education, because at the end of the day, what matters most is that you are prepared and able to show up to take care of people's health in the setting that you choose, regardless of your own struggles. That's just the way it is. That's what you sign up for. And there's not a lot you can change about it. But this is why the first point is so crucial, because it is imperative that your faculty, advisors, coworkers, bosses are in the loop on this piece of you so that communication is easier down the line. It is a lot easier to say, hey, being in this environment right now, really triggering for me. Can we go ahead with the plan that we talked about? Instead of in the moment trying to say, hey, so my brother and my boyfriend died, and my brother died in the ICU 4 years ago, and, we're in the ICU right now, and it's making me feel really lightheaded. I actually might throw up because, okay, that is just really chaotic. It feels really bad for you in the moment, and it's really hard to make a game plan as things are happening. So, communication ahead of time is always going to be better than later. Another key part of this point, though, is that you need to structure your life to the best of your ability to set yourself up for success. So like I said, not a whole lot that you can change about medical education, but I did have a lot of control over what my life looked like and how I was responding to the situation and the stress that I was in from being in PA school. And for me, that was understanding the importance of my lifestyle on my stress during this time. I learned really quickly that the little things like meal prepping on the weekends, aiming for 8 hours of sleep every night, exercising as much as I could were not little things, and creating margin in my free time was so crucial. The whole margin concept was one I had heard in church a long time ago, and I feel like it perfectly describes what I have been doing throughout PA school. It's basically being intentional with your free time and allocating time to recharge instead of filling up all of your free time with busy activities. For me, communication and this mindfulness of taking care of myself, creating margin in the little free time that I had was so essential for me to allow myself to still do the thing that I had worked so hard for so long for. Last point I have for you is remind yourself that the things that make it hard for you to do it are exactly the reason why you should. Instead of being frustrated with how grief and trauma have made my PA school journey more difficult, I try to remind myself that the love I have for Mac and Sam and the lessons and compassion that losing them has given me is truly a gift to my future patients, far more than it could ever be a burden. Last point was short and sweet, and we're just going to leave it there for this week. Remember, I care. I'm on your team. And thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next Monday. Bye.